Iowa regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. You know, if you ever see me wearing a concert t-shirt, 90% chance we're talking with Stephen Gutowski from the Reload. Because Stephen has a tendency to wear music shirts, so I indulge myself when Stephen comes on. So I'm wearing my the last concert I went to, Band of Horses, Dinosaur Jr. Great show for those of us in Generation X and maybe even a few boomers as well. Oh, actually, I take it back. There were some millennials there. I don't think too many Zoomers at the show, but that's okay. All right, so we're going to be talking about Stephen's new piece at the Washington Post, which I love this piece. Stephen's talking about the rise in long gun sales in Virginia ahead of the ban, and basically the fact that Virginia Democrats ended up selling a lot of so-called assault firearms. There was about a 3-week period where those firearms and magazines were not available for sale in Virginia. And then on July 21st, an injunction kicked in statewide and sales resumed. So they burned through a lot of political capital. They ended up selling a lot of guns ahead of time. And then they had basically a 3-week pause. And now the law itself is on pause. I predict that it is going to remain on hold, that this injunction will stand until the Supreme Court issues its decision in Viramontes versus Cook County and the Connecticut gun ban cases, which will probably be next June. And then I think these bans on so-called assault weapons, or in Virginia, assault firearms, I think they're done for across the country. So, I mean, honestly, the most tangible thing that Virginia Democrats accomplished with their gun and magazine ban is putting a lot more of them into the homes of Virginians. So thanks, fellas. Anyway, great conversation with us, Stephen, including the reaction to his Washington Post piece from some Washington Post readers who, as you can imagine, aren't quite as Second Amendment friendly as Stephen is, as I am, and as you are. And wow, there's a lot of butt hurt in the comments section there at the Washington Post. Anyway, great conversation. Take a look and a listen. Steve, it's good to see you again. Thanks so much for coming on the program.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And I got to say, really enjoyed your piece of the Washington Post on the unintended consequences for the gun banners in Virginia. Taking a look at the sales of long guns in particular in the Old Dominion. This is something that you and I have both been covering really since, I think really probably since the November elections, right? Because that is when we started to see the sales of these long guns tick up, and they just kept going up and kept going up and kept going up to the point that by May, I think we had basically doubled the sale of long guns compared to May of 2025. And then, June was just, I think it's fair to say that we haven't seen anything like that in Virginia in terms of gun sales.
Really not even close, because I went back through all the NICS numbers for this Post piece, and we had 43,000 NICS checks for long guns in June in Virginia, which was the most of any state, by the way, more than Texas or California or Florida or in any much larger states. Virginia is the 12th most populous state, but had the most long gun sales in the country in June of 2026, I think. And look, unsurprisingly, right? I think you, I, and your audience would expected this to happen. Maybe it's come as a surprise to some of the Virginia lawmakers whose intended goal with this ban, was to effectively try and minimize the number of these types of guns out there. And I would, just to note real quick, long guns, that's as specific as it gets with your National Instant Criminal Background Check System numbers. But that includes all of the rifles, and that's very likely, if you talk to any gun store owner in Virginia, they're selling ARs because of this ban. And, it's the most ever for a single month in June for long gun sales, because I went back and looked. The previous record was actually It was like 39,000 in December of 2012, which was the moment across the country where people were buying ARs because they were concerned about a new federal ban that never came to pass, but it was a real concern people had at the time. And so, this goes beyond that peak. It goes beyond the peak of 2020, 2021, where we had the pandemic related spike. So, they've driven an enormous amount of sales, probably hundreds of thousands at this point of new banned guns. These what they're describing as assault firearms, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, math was never my strong suit in high school, but I did some, back of the envelope calculations. And I think it's fair to say probably 200,000 more long guns sold in Virginia than what would have been sold otherwise during that time period, right? Going back to like December of last year. And I checked the comments of the Washington Post piece, Stephen, which never read the comments, but I did find one that I thought was it missed the point entirely. But this individual basically said, okay, so another way of looking at this is 2 years worth of long guns were sold in this time period. Well, I'll take that for a zero sales starting in 2028, which again, I think they kind of missed the point here, right? We're not going to, I don't think we're going to have zero sales of AR-15s in Virginia or any other state in 2028 because I think these bans are going to be struck down.
Exactly. I mean, and so I guess they just didn't read most of the piece because that's the second half of the piece, the whole point. And I know this was published in the opinion section of the Washington Post, but it is much more of an analysis piece. Like there's not really disputing any of this. These gun sales are way up. We have evidence of that. And they're likely not going to be banned for much longer. And in fact, as you've reported and I've reported, they're already unbanned in Virginia. You can go out and buy an AR-15 right now in Virginia, despite this law, because of an injunction that's been issued. Now, there's some uncertainty around what's going to happen with the Virginia lawsuits from between now and the real deadline for all this stuff, which is when the Supreme Court issues its opinion. But the reality is, I think it's essentially beyond dispute at this point. I don't want to, you know me, I like to be more in the nuance, but I would say at this point, if you're looking at the Supreme Court's AR-15 ban case, it's very hard to see how they don't rule against these bans. It's as close to a sure thing as I would be willing to say for a pending case. And so there's, not to say that there's nothing or no uncertainty at all, but we already know how 4 justices are going to vote because they've publicly either ruled that way in the past, like Kavanaugh and Heller too, or they've come out in public and made statements to the effect that they don't think AR-15 bans are constitutional. And so the only question left is, how are Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett going to vote? There's some intrigue maybe about how the liberals go, but primarily you just need one of those two. And I don't think there's any reason to think, even though they don't have public statements on this, we do have everything else they've ruled so far on the Second Amendment and what they've said in those cases. And there's really no reason to think that at least one of them won't go that way, and almost certainly both of them will. So, at this point, we have just hard evidence that this has increased sales dramatically, which is what happens around any time you try to ban a certain, not even just weapons, but certainly with weapons. But anytime you try to tell Americans not to buy, that they tend to go out and buy that thing until they can't buy it anymore. And on the other hand, it's not going to prevent sales in the future. So all they've really accomplished, because of what's going to happen with this legal situation, because they're going to lose in court, all they've accomplished is selling more of these guns in the interim.
Yeah. I mean, no, you're right. And, I'll be curious to see what the numbers are for July, because, July 1st, the ban did take effect. July 21st, the injunction kicked in, and both you at the Reload and myself at Bearing Arms talked to some gun stores the day that injunction was put in place. And, one guy I talked to in Lynchburg said, he said, we're selling guns. He said, it's not like it was, June 30th. He said, but I think a lot of people, they spent their money, it's like they need time to recoup and save up again. So, July is going to look nothing like June did. August is going to look nothing like June did. I think those sales are going to be much closer to the historic norms, maybe even a little bit lower because, again, you front loaded those sales in June, but the sales will continue, right? And the other issue, and you can find this thread in the comments of Stephen's piece of the Washington Post as well, is that the gun industry, they love this. Look, this isn't the gun industry. I know you talk about VCDL going out and telling people, hey, buy these guns while they're still available. With all due respect to the VCDL, they're not responsible for the surge in sales, right? I mean, this is, as you say, this is a phenomenon. You tell Americans you can't do this, and Americans are going to say, "Yeah, I can," or "I'm going to while I still can," right?
Right.
This wasn't the gun lobby inspiring, panic buying. This was the direct result of Democrats in Virginia banning the sale of these firearms. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, did groups say go out and buy these? I mean, I think BCL's message there was just essentially don't assume these are going to be available after the ban goes into effect, especially because they were talking at the period when the injunctions first issued and there was this confusion and sort of legal mess around what was going on with the ban because, okay, the state police can't enforce this law and a handful of Commonwealth attorneys can't, but everybody else technically can. And so, if you're going to buy this stuff, you should buy it before the date. Now they're out. I just had Phil Van Cleve on my show, but there's broad agreement in the gun world, among the gun rights groups, among the gun industry, the trade group, the National Shooting Sports Foundation. They all agree that sales right now, because that injunction eventually got expanded, as you described there on the 21st, they're of the opinion that buying and selling AR-15s and the banned magazines, and obviously this law affects, it's a one feature ban, so it affects way more than just AR-15s and more than your traditional 90s era assault weapons bans did.
Right.
But obviously that's the main target is AR-15s, and it's good shorthand. It's the most popular gun that's being banned. But those things are legal to buy again, and they are on sale. And I will say too, like I did, for instance, here in my hometown where I live, Sharpshooters is one of the local stores and range. And, when I went in on the 21st to ask, whether they were selling it, and they said they were, but they didn't have any stock because they sold out of all that. And I think that has been a common problem. Not only did demand get pushed forward by all this because people rushed to buy this stuff before it was off the shelves, but also like they sold so much that there's not a lot of inventory left in the state right now. I'm sure you can go and find stuff, right? Like
probably it's not, now, but that was one of the folks that I talked to said that as well. They're like, the distributors weren't shipping until the injunction took effect, right? So, what was left on the shelf basically on July the 1st is what they had in stock on July 21st, right? Now we're a week in, and I assume that the shipments have resumed. You're starting to see the shelves kind of get back to normal. But yeah, that was definitely another reason why you didn't see that same surge in sales, because the guns weren't there, right? They'd already been bought. So it's fascinating to see this, and I'm really curious to see what Democrats will do in Virginia this next session, because when they go into session, the Supreme Court will not have decided Viramontes. They will not have issued their opinion in the gun ban case. The law in Virginia will be on hold. I think the writing's on the wall. I'm curious to see if the Democrats get proactive. Do they try to introduce a permit to purchase bill, try to repeal the ban, or do they ride it out, wait until the Supreme Court decision comes down? They probably won't be in session at that point, right? And then you'd have a period of, I don't know, 5-6 months, maybe even close to a year before that permit to purchase could take effect. I suspect that there are some really interesting conversations being held behind closed doors with people like Dan Helmer and Saddam Salim, the architects of the gun ban in Virginia.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I mean, that's a good question for the whole country, right? In particular in Virginia, though, because of the dynamics you just mentioned, it'll be perhaps one of the first places that you see them maybe try to respond to what everyone's anticipating the Supreme Court will do, especially if, because there's still some mystery as to how this is all going to play out in the next year, right? We have the injunction in place. I was surprised that nothing happened between the time he expanded and the time it went into effect. Right, there's like 2 weeks, and a case that moves as fast as these cases are moving, or that has. I expected him to move a lot faster, and we'd have more rulings from higher courts or more action from the attorney general. He seems to have withdrawn his stay request from the Supreme Court. Maybe because he lost that effort to combine the cases.
Well, you've
Right?
had a couple of there are four state level cases. You've had a couple of them where the judge has said, yes, this is all state until what the Supreme Court,
Right.
issue their decision. So it may be that Jones doesn't feel like he needs to, but I think you're right about the Virginia Court of Appeals not acting.
Mm.
The Virginia state court system is moving very deliberately. They're not trying to rush this, which I'm happy with. But I am a little surprised by that too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I figured that whatever state it arrives at the Virginia State Supreme Court in, if it does get that far, maybe it won't. Because given how slowly things have been moving at this point, I would think they just leave it in that state until the U.S. Supreme Court rules. But maybe it won't even get that far. Maybe it'll just be like the current injunction lasts through July of next year. So in theory, nothing. They don't have to do anything on this front. And we may just be in the state that it's going to be in until the Supreme Court rules. I'm sure a lot of gun owners and gun businesses would prefer it to stay that way. But I'm less sure about what's going to happen there. And I'm not, like you, I'm not sure what how do Virginia Democrats react to this? Do they give up on the ban, which I think would be politically, perilous to a certain degree for, that they just spend a lot of political capital to do this kind of thing. It's like the redistricting. They spent a lot of political capital trying to get that done, and then they lost on it in the courts. So what do you do now? Like, do you try, is it something where you want to spend even more capital? I think if you're trying to restrict these guns as much as possible, the savvy move probably is to just give up on the ban and go for a Colorado style permit to purchase or possess system, because that has a better chance of surviving the current standard the Supreme Court has set. But that's admitting that what you passed in the first place was unconstitutional, and then you got to go through and do the whole process of passing a new law in an election year. Right. Next year is an election year in Virginia. So messing with this stuff, I think often politicians might be the easier choice would just be to leave things as they are until they're forced to do something about it. But they might lose the Senate next year or the House. The Senate's easier. There's only one seat advantage, right? But they might not be able to do it after the next session if they perform poorly in the 2027 elections. We don't know. Yeah. Right? That's the risk they face.
Yeah, there's a lot of considerations for the anti-gunners in Richmond right now. And meanwhile, you talk about Colorado. I'm curious to see what the long gun numbers look like for Colorado. Because August 1st is when the permit to purchase law kicks in. So I think they're probably seeing a bit of the same phenomena that we saw in Virginia in June. Happening right now, where people are, going and getting these guns before you have to get a special permission slip from the county sheriff and proof of training and all of this other rigmarole that you've got to go through in order to purchase the most popular rifle in the country right now.
Yeah, although I will say in Colorado, although this, as you mentioned, it happened here in Virginia, the sales were elevated right from the election when it was pretty clear what the majority was going to do. They were going to pass this law. People figured that out, fairly early on. But you saw that in Colorado already. They did have some elevated sales numbers back when they first passed this new law, and they delayed things. They're giving themselves more time to put a law into. Now their law is much more complicated too.
Yeah,
they have to come up with all these permitting processes.
Yeah, but they had like more than a year lead time. Right.
Yeah, and you did see numbers rise there already. So I don't know if you'll see the same level of like huge spike, but people it's one of those things where you have to know this is happening, and you're more likely to know it's happening right before than you are 6 months out if you're the average person. So I wouldn't be shocked if those numbers started to jump up again in Colorado as well.
Yeah, well, we'll see in the coming days. Stephen Gutowski, founder of the Reload. Always a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it soon. Do it again soon. Stephen Gutowski, be sure to check him out at the Reload. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe and get Stephen's great analysis there on a regular basis. My thanks to Mr. Gutowski, and looking forward to having him back again on the program here before long. I'll probably be on the Reload podcast before long as well. It seems to be kind of symbiotic that way. All right, before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, I want to talk about this for a second. From city streets to mountain trails, your gear should go wherever life takes you. And that's why in Modern Rugged Leather, every bag is handcrafted from premium, responsibly sourced leather. It's designed to look sharp, last long, and tell a story all its own. Every stitch, every buckle, every strap reflects timeless craftsmanship. And it's backed by a lifetime warranty, because quality shouldn't quit when the adventure begins. Whether it's the boardroom or the back roads, Modern Rugged Leather helps you carry confidence every step of the way. Modern Rugged Leather, modern style, timeless durability, backed for life. Life takes you places. Make sure your gear keeps up. They're getting ready to debut a whole new collection at modernrugged.com. So if you go there, you can enter your email address, find out when. You'll be among the first to find out when these new products drop. Again, that is modernrugged.com. I'm looking forward to taking my Modern Rugged bag with me to Dallas, Fort Worth area, coming up end of September at Gun Rights Policy Conference. I just finalized my travel plans yesterday, and I hope that you can be there as well. GRPC is going to be an absolutely incredible event this year. Retired Judge Roger Benitez, going to be the keynote speaker. Saint Benitez, as he is known in the 2A community. That alone, I think, is worth the price of admission. $25 gets you in the door. And 2 days worth of some incredible speakers, and for some reason, me too. So anyway, looking forward to being a part of Gun Rights Policy Conference here in a couple of months. Right now, let's get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of Delaware. Candy seller robbed at gunpoint in Wilmington parking lot. Should be a comma there. Teen arrested. Not a parking lot teen, but a teen was arrested for this robbery of somebody selling candy in a parking lot. 14-year-old arrested, accused of robbing a person at gunpoint in a Wilmington shopping center. Delaware State Police say investigators tracked him to a hotel in Newark, Delaware, and recovered a loaded pistol. According to the Delaware State Police, the victim was walking through the parking lot selling candy when an unknown suspect approached, demanded the victim's property. The victim initially refused. That's when the suspect allegedly flashed a handgun. Police said the victim then surrendered the property, and the suspect fled the area. Thankfully, the victim was not injured. The Delaware State Police Criminal Investigations Unit assumed the investigation, identified the suspect as a 14-year-old male from Newark. They determined that the teen was living in a hotel there in Newark, Delaware. They also learned that he was on probation following a felony adjudication stemming from a stolen motor vehicle investigation. So you've got a 14-year-old convicted felon who's out on the street, allegedly possesses a handgun, allegedly uses it to rob somebody. What do you think is going to happen here? You think this 14-year-old is going to do 4 years in juvenile detention if he's convicted of other felonies? I'll be honest with you, I doubt it very much. I think we're looking at another slap on the wrist. I bet this kid's out before he's 16. I bet he's out well before he's 16. And sadly, I would not be surprised if he's arrested again before he's 16. Because the juvenile justice system in this country is broken. Delaware is not an exception. It's just the rule. We do not have a juvenile justice system that is capable of treating violent offenders appropriately. The philosophy is we want to try to rehabilitate these individuals, and I get it. I really truly do. But when we're talking, it's a sad reality, man, to say this person's 14, and I don't think he can be rehabilitated. But you know what? That is the reality for some 14-year-olds. And we can try, but I think that rehabilitation has to take place behind bars. because they've proven themselves to be a danger to the community. Here you've got a 14-year-old, his first felony, we assume it was his first felony, was for stealing a car. Well, instead of being rehabilitated and getting back on the straight and narrow, his crimes have now allegedly escalated to the point that he's using a gun to commit an armed robbery. That's a problem. I just don't have any confidence that the Delaware juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system is going to see it as the problem that it is. Today's armed citizen story from Indiana. I actually wrote about this last evening at Bearing Arms, so you may have run across this story already, but if not, no charges filed after fatal shooting during road rage incident in Indiana, according to the prosecutor. This was in Hancock County. And, you know, like every road rage incident out there, this just didn't need to happen. I you know, when I lived in Northern Virginia especially, well, I'd get angry driving on the Beltway. People drive like, it's family friendly, so people drive like idiots. And I had a friend that I would talk to sometimes hands-free while I'm driving into work, because it would take, 30, 45 minutes sometimes to go like 15 miles. And my friend would always laugh because my language was very colorful, shall we say. So we'd be having a regular conversation, all of a sudden, bleep, 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 bleep. But that's where I left it. I left it in the car. I yelled at people, and, honestly, by the time I got to work, I had forgotten about the idiots on the road. They did not ruin my day. And I wish that more people had that attitude. Yeah, yell at them through your car. Think what a moron they are. And then go about your day. Don't let them ruin your day. Because sometimes if you do that, you can ruin your life. And that's apparently what happened here in Indiana. This happened back on July 21st. 37-year-old Kevin Powell, legally justified in using deadly force because he reasonably feared for his life during a confrontation with another driver. So according to investigators, Kevin Powell was the one who was shot and killed by a driver of a Volkswagen. So Powell and the Volkswagen driver, they've been driving along the same road. Powell's driving a Dodge Journey. He's apparently angry at the Volkswagen driver for driving too fast. So what does he do? He drives too fast, and he gets right up on the Volkswagen's bumper. Eyewitnesses said it was in with about a foot of the Volkswagen's rear bumper. At some point, it was in about 6 inches of the Volkswagen's rear bumper as they're driving down the road, right? So he's driving very aggressively at that point. They get into a construction zone. There's traffic, and at some point, both vehicles stop. That's when Kevin Powell gets out of his car, goes up and approaches the Volkswagen, yelling, "You shouldn't be driving on my road that fast, bleeper bleeper." A witness who did not know Powell, did not know the driver of the Volkswagen, just another person who was there, described Powell as being very hostile. Now, Powell yells at the guy in the Volkswagen, then turns around, starts to walk back to his car. And then he turns around again. And he starts walking back towards the Volkswagen. That's when the driver of the Volkswagen Jetta got out of his vehicle, holding a handgun, and said, "I wouldn't do that. Don't do that. Get back in your car." At this point, Powell had threatened to hurt the driver of the Jetta, according to eyewitnesses. It wasn't just, "You shouldn't be driving that fast." Basically said, "I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to kill you." Something along those lines. Powell continued walking towards the driver of the Volkswagen Jetta. That driver then fired several shots, striking Powell multiple times. Powell then retreated to his vehicle, where he passed away from his injuries. Witnesses told investigators that Powell had challenged the Volkswagen driver before the shooting, allegedly saying, "Oh, you're going to get your gun? You afraid? You're going to get your gun? Well, come on, get out." Meaning get out of the vehicle. Hancock County Prosecutor Brent Eaton said the evidence showed that Powell was the aggressor throughout the entirety of the confrontation, saying at every point the driver of the second vehicle was the aggressor and was intent on escalating the situation. Another independent witness told investigators that the driver of the Volkswagen appeared to be in fear for his life. And under Indiana law, that's if you reasonably fear great bodily injury, not even fear of death, but just you are afraid that you're going to be hurt. You have the ability, you have the right to use deadly force in defense of yourself or others if you believe that somebody else is about to be seriously hurt. And in this case, you've got a guy who, again, is threatening to harm the driver, who is warned, hey, I've got a gun, you need to get back, continues to escalate his behavior. The independent witnesses said, this guy appeared to be in fear of his life. I think one witness said, I would have been afraid for my life. And the Hancock County Prosecutor's Office declined to file criminal charges against the Volkswagen driver. The prosecutor said, it's tragic because it's avoidable. The driver of the second vehicle, there was no reason for him to get out of his car. The law in Indiana is clear. If you are in fear for your life, you do not have a duty to retreat, and you're able to use deadly force, and that's what happened here. And it is tragic. I don't know Kevin Powell. None of us know who Kevin Powell was as a guy, right? He could have been a great guy. Could have been a good friend, could have been a great coworker, could have given you the shirt off his back, could just have been having a bad day. But that doesn't excuse his behavior and his actions at that time. Again, I find these particular defensive gun uses, I guess you could say that every defensive gun use is preventable if the, aggressor just doesn't act aggressively. But we see these road rage stories so often. And I do find it so tragic because, again, it's so easily avoidable. All you have to do is don't be a jackass. It's okay to get upset with other drivers. But seriously, go about your day and you're going to forget about them by the time you get to your destination. They're not going to ruin your day. They're not even probably going to ruin your hour. So don't put yourself in a position where you ruin your life over the actions of some other driver on the road. I find that tragic. All right. Finally today, our good deed of the day. In the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A Iowa man who was recently honored for rescuing a couple of kids after a pretty significant car crash there in Kossuth County, Iowa. Alex Horak is his name. He got the life-saving award during a ceremony yesterday, stemming from a crash earlier this month on July 14th where a car collided with a train. Horak was able to pull two boys from the vehicle as it burned. A sheriff's office also presented outstanding performance awards to dispatchers Monica Perucci and Therese Becker. Perucci has been a dispatcher over 30 years and was training Becker at the time. She'd been on the job for less than 3 months. And apparently they helped Horak in what was a incredibly chaotic situation. So don't have a lot of details about the crash, but KIMT in Iowa reports that Horak did receive that life-saving award from the Kossuth County Sheriff's Office, and in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing for a couple of kids in need. Alex Horak, we thank you for your very good deed. But that is all we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. But tomorrow, we're going to be talking with Florida Carry's Sean Carana. Looking forward to that. I don't think we've ever had Sean on the program before, but we're going to talk about the intricacies of Florida's firearms preemption law. We've seen Attorney General James Uthmeier be pretty aggressive in going after communities for violating the preemption law. Well, Florida Carry's also keeping an eye on what municipalities and counties are doing, and they recently sent out a couple of letters to localities saying, hey, you're not in compliance. And they've already gotten some results. We'll talk about that. And again, how the law actually works there in Florida. Looking forward to a great conversation with Sean, so be sure to check that out. And be sure to check out what we're doing at BearingArms.com today as well. We are keeping you up to date on all the latest Second Amendment news and information. In fact, we've got an update from the Legally Armed in Detroit event that took place this past weekend. We had Jackie Emsley on the program previewing that event. I just finished writing my post about this. Absolutely great. Almost 2,500 women showed up for that event. Absolutely incredible. So be sure to check that out. We've got more for you at Bearing Arms as well. If you like what you see, would also encourage you to become a VIP Gold or VIP Platinum member. Just go to bearingarms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code FIGHT and take 60% off your membership. And if you do, thanks so much for supporting the work we're doing at Bearing Arms, because it really does make a difference and it means a lot. Enjoy the rest of your 2A Tuesday. I'll be on Newsmax in the 6 p.m. Eastern hour with Carl Higbee, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company.